One of the early killer apps for the PS2, Twisted Metal Black took the popular Twisted Metal franchise into a new, darker direction. From the storylines to the arenas and the whole art direction, this game is without a doubt the most twisted game in the series. Not that Calypso wasn't already a pretty messed up guy in the previous games, but this time he raids a local insane asylum for contestants for his latest Twisted Metal tournament. Twisted Metal Black also marked the return to the franchise of members of the team responsible for the first two Twisted Metal games on the PlayStation 1. Single Track developed the first two Twisted Metal games, but was later bought out by GT Interactive and lost the rights to the Twisted Metal franchise. Sony would then give development privileges to 989 Studios, who developed Twisted Metal 3 and Twisted Metal 4, while Single Track would go on to develop a few lesser-known games like Critical Depth and Rogue Trip Vacation 2012. In 1999, members of Single Track left to form Incognito Inc., which was a part of SCEA's Santa Monica Studios, who would later go on to make God of War. Incog took back the development of Twisted Metal and gave us arguably the best game in this series. I say arguably because my personal favorite is Twisted Metal 2. And more importantly, reinvented the series, which had grown a bit stagnant after the third and fourth releases. Twisted Metal Black has all the classic Twisted Metal gameplay with a great dark atmosphere, and it even added some new things to the formula as well, like new weapons and much larger maps with more hidden areas to find. This is easily my favorite car combat game on the PS2, not that there is a ton of competition in the genre for the PS2, as car combat games pretty much died in that generation of gaming. Even though my personal slant is towards Twisted Metal 2, I can honestly say that Twisted Metal Black is the crowning achievement in the vehicular combat genre. And later, when Sony released the network adapter for the PS2, it would come with a voucher to get a free copy of Twisted Metal Black Online. Twisted Metal Black Online was a multiplayer-only version of Twisted Metal Black, but was a great freebie for early network adapter adopters. The official servers for the game have long since been taken down, but it still supports local area network play from PS2 to PS2, which requires a network adapter or a slim PS2. You can play it with your friends from multiple consoles, or more importantly, use a tunneling service to play it online to this day. Twisted Metal Black Online isn't required if you want to experience Twisted Metal, but you can still get some enjoyment out of it if you have the right setup. With its dark atmosphere, well-designed arenas, tight addictive gameplay, and reinvention of the series, Twisted Metal Black has earned the honor of being Station Geek's Game of the Month for August 2018. It is truly one of the last great vehicular combat games and the pinnacle of the once popular but almost forgotten genre. When Sony released the PS3 version of Twisted Metal, it came with a voucher for a free download of Twisted Metal Black, but the game is also available to buy digitally on the PlayStation Store. If you missed the hubbub over the vehicular combat in the 90s and early 2000s, or are nostalgic for this game, I wholeheartedly recommend you check it out on your PS3 or PS4 systems.
There was a time in the era of great chaos when the Earth and the Moon were at war with each other. A daredevil from the moon piloted a bizarre aircraft. It was feared, and because of its shape, called Einhander.
So what happens when that Final Fantasy company decides to diversify their portfolio of games and try their hand at the shoot 'em up genre? literally the last genre you would expect to see from Squaresoft? The answer is the PlayStation's most popular and mainstream recognized shooter in Einhander. Their tenure on the PlayStation 1 really saw Squaresoft experimenting and expanding into new intellectual properties in new genres in both the games they developed and published. Outside of putting up arguably their strongest lineup of traditional RPGs ever, they also expanded into publishing games like Tobal No. 1, Bushido Blade 1 and 2, and Guys. I will never actually know how to pronounce this game's name. Games like Einhander and Chocobo Racing also showed that Square had started to dip their toes into other genres as well. While NES fans will remember games like Rad Racer and 3D World Runner as non-RPG Squaresoft games, Square had pretty much been that RPG company since their release of Final Fantasy. And Einhander is a testament to a time when Square started to branch out more and experiment with new genres. Einhander, aside from being the first polygonal shooter I played personally, is easily the most popular shooter of its type on the PlayStation 1, making its way onto multiple demo discs in its time and getting full-page spreads in magazines like GamePro magazine. It seems as if this was an attempt on Squaresoft's part to break the underrepresented, in the mainstream flow of gaming that is, shoot-'em-up genre into mainstream popularity. An extremely niche genre that had, and in many ways always has been, relegated to the hardcore niche gamers and genre zealots alike. Many of those same genre zealots will be the first to tell you they consider Einhander to be one of the most overrated shooters of all time. As the most mainstream popular shoot-'em-up on the PlayStation, their stance is understandable as some people consider this to be the greatest shoot-'em-up of all time. Seeing as this is a niche genre with so many incredible underrated offerings over the decades, it is understandable as to why some genre fans don't like this game very much. As, even in the PS1's incredibly underrated library of shooters, I wouldn't pick Einhander as my favorite either. That being said, this game still has a lot going for it and is still a great attempt by Squaresoft to break shoot-'em-ups into the mainstream market. Chances are if you played no other games in this genre when you owned a PlayStation, you probably at least played the demo of this one. If Einhander is still your favorite shoot-'em-up of all time, you still chose well. You should never let genre snobs, something that the shoot-'em-up genre has an overwhelmingly high percentage of from my experience, make you feel bad for liking any game you like. And this game still has a lot going for it. Einhander still retains that trademark tough as nails but very intense shoot-'em-up genre gameplay. At its core, the gameplay seems pretty basic when compared to other shooters. No big screen clearing bombs, no multiple options to follow alongside your ship, or even an in-game upgrade purchase menu like in Gradius. Einhander is you, your ship, and whatever gun pods you collect off your foes along the way. In Einhander, the core gameplay revolves around collecting and using various gun pods you collect off of fallen enemies, mixed with using whichever ship type you choose to play through the game with. Throughout the game, various enemies drop different guns for the player to equip and use. These gun pods have a finite amount of ammo, so it's up to the player's discretion on how and when to use them. On top of the gun pods, each ship type comes equipped with your standard infinite ammo machine gun, and various gun pod abilities depending on which ship you choose. For example, out of the 3 default ships, there are 2 unlockable types as well. The first just has 2 gun pod slots, one of which replaces your default machine gun. This type uses the gun pods until they run out of ammo and discards them, and is the hardest ship to play through the game with. The second type has only 1 extra gun pod slot, but can store up to 3 pods at once, allowing the player to swap between each pod on the fly, making for a customized type of strategy. Using the right pod at the right time instead of just expending your gun pods at random and trying to hunt for a new one on the fly. The last has dual machine guns and simplified controls and can carry 1 gun pod, making it ideal for beginners to use, and it does more damage with its basic machine gun. Choosing the right craft and the right gun pod for the job is essential to your success in this game. Einhander has a good variety of gun pods to use. Some are really cool, but some aren't effective in every situation. For example, the grenade launcher and the hedgehog are devastating against the bosses, but are almost useless when being swarmed. You can also earn new gun pods throughout the game to equip on your fighter from the beginning of the game, which are re-equipped on your fighter after every death, meaning you don't have to start with just the basic machine gun after you die. Another cool feature in the game is that the bosses and some regular enemies blow apart into sectional portions, so players can go for a larger score and whittle the bosses down into their final state, or just go for the kill, attacking each boss's main damage point. The game also has some cool visual aesthetics that go along with it being a fully polygonal shooter versus a sprite-based one. Nice explosion and colored lighting effects, dynamic camera angle switches that add a cinematic flair to the game, the big bosses sport imaginative designs and are well animated, and the early polygonal graphics hold up nicer to modern eyes than many other PS1 offerings will. The only graphical problem I have with the game is a common problem I find in many polygonal shooters, and that is it is sometimes hard in the colored lighting, explosion effects, and waves of enemies to spot incoming enemy fire, leading sometimes to frustrating deaths from projectiles you didn't even see coming. The game controls perfectly and has no issues, even in bouts of slowdown that do occur. Swapping gun pods is a cinch, and speeding your ship up or down is also simple as pressing a button, which is a plus in the midst of the action. Some fighters may seem more complicated to use in the throes of battle, but that's a practice issue for the player, not really a control issue. The music is also well done, but what would you expect coming from Squaresoft? As for any complaints I may have against the game, I really can't think of any, outside of my own lack of skill at games in this genre. The entire game is solid and has the average learning curve when it comes to shoot 'em ups, learning the quirks of the gun pods and their best uses and memorizing the level and boss patterns are an integral part of Einhander, as it is in all shoot 'em ups. Honestly, this game plays well, looks good, controls well, and has all the needed intensity for this genre, and is overall a very solid showing in the genre, even though I would agree that there are better shooters out there. All that being said, for being a well-made, well-playing, solid shooter and an admirable attempt to break this niche genre out into mainstream success, and to break out past just being an RPG company on Squaresoft's part, Einhander earned Station Geek's Game of the Month for September 2018. Love it, hate it, or fall somewhere in the middle, this is easily the PlayStation's most mainstream recognizable shoot 'em up.